समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
I will give you some details about the long, cluttered 6-decade or maybe 7-decade story of Naga insurgency and separatism. I will also tell you how this also conforms to our usual bell curve theory, but in a different way. Instead of one bell curve, this will have a bunch of bell curves, and I will tell you what will define those bell curves. So if you look at Nagaland, usually when you look at a problem like this going back 7 decades, you begin with history. In Nagaland's case, you begin with geography, then you come to demography or the tribes, then you come to individuals, and history then gets woven in as you talk. So first of all, geography. Nagaland is one of our smaller states, but not that small either. It's about 5 times the size of Goa. You can see it on the map, just sort of like the eastern extreme. The only foreign country it borders is Myanmar, or what used to be Burma. It doesn't border East Pakistan. It's nowhere near China, but it borders Burma in an area which for a long time the Burmese government barely controlled. It was controlled by many Burmese insurgent groups. There was the Kachin Independent Army, there was the Shan State Army, Burmese Communist Party, Red Flag, White Flag, all kinds of people. In fact, Bertil Lintner, who's a foreign journalist, he's written very well about those insurgent groups in the past. You can reference and Google his articles. So, Burma was where Nagas through Burma found access into China, or through Burma into Bangladesh, what was then East Pakistan, and then into China, because both Pakistan and China were helping them. Rest of the geography, they have a large border with Assam, they have a large border with Manipur, where also some Naga groups live. They also have not that large, but a very crucial border with Arunachal, because that's the part of Arunachal that's very thinly populated and has been traditionally very thinly protected, and that takes you straight into Burma to a point that might be, say, closest to get to the Chinese mainland. And also the tribal mix in that district of Arunachal, Tirap district, is also Nagas, although of different shades. Now that is geography. Second is demography. Now, Nagaland's population is about 28 lakh, 2.8 million. That's about less than 1/6 of all of Delhi. Its area is about, as I said, 5 times the size of Goa, 1.5 times the size of Lebanon today. So you can see it's a large state with a very thinly spread out population, with only a couple of urban centers of any size. Even Dimapur, which is in the plains, and where a large section of the population is actually plains population, not tribal, it's just about 3 lakh people. So it's a very well spread out, scattered, rural state. The important thing is, of these 28 lakh people or so, Nagas are not one tribe. Nagas are several tribes sort of put in one generic category with very strong divergences amongst them, including the language. Each Naga tribe has its own language with very little in common with the other Naga tribe. So over time, they developed a lingua franca, which is called Nagamese, which is actually Assamese spoken in Naga style. Nagaland was a district of Assam all this while. Bit like Haryanvis might speak Hindi, so it becomes Haryanvi. No insult meant to Haryanvis who think they have a native language of their own, me included. But when the British and other pastors came and the Christian missionaries came, they developed Roman scripts for these languages, and they also wrote the Bible and other holy books in Roman script. Literacy came very fast. So Nagaland has almost 100% literacy now. These diverse tribes, efforts were made to keep them together, but there are anything between 16 to 29 tribes depending on how you count them. Generally, I would say that there are about 19 tribes, 16 or 17 in Nagaland, or 16 in Nagaland, 1 in Burma, 2 in Manipur. I mean, prominent tribes. Of these tribes, no tribe has dominant population, which means no tribe is even 20% of this population. So there are 3 tribes, it's Aos and Konyaks and Semas, which are 13 to 14% each. There is also the Angami tribe, which is politically very powerful because the founder of the Naga underground, Fizo, Zapu Angami Fizo, was obviously an Angami. They are just about 8%. Similarly, the tribe that's politically very powerful now are the Tangkhuls. That's about 8%, about 2 lakh people, but they don't live in Nagaland. They live in Ukhrul district of Manipur. Similarly, there is another tribe called Mao, which also lives in Manipur. That's about 2 lakh people, again about 7% of this. The rest of the tribes, I said Angamis are about 7 to 8%, Tangkhuls are about 6 to 7, about 8%, Maos are about 6%, and all the rest are much smaller. So I told you very early on that I will tell you why this is a story of not one bell curve, but many bell curves. Why? Because in this case, because the tribes were never together and there was a history of warfare among the tribes, various leaders tried to put them together, but Government of India, Indian Army, and most of all Indian intelligence. The success against Naga insurgency, essentially while the army has fought very courageously, etc., and politicians have shown a big heart, the real success in Nagaland lies in an unsung organization. That is the Intelligence Bureau. Because at any given point of time, at great risk, officers of Intelligence Bureau kept communication with underground leaders, moved around with them, earned their confidence, kept on persuading them to come over ground, never betrayed any of them. And I had told you earlier in my Kathak letter on the bell curve, a couple of days back, that India followed the policy of protecting the leaders of these insurgencies. So when we talk about leaders, we come to individuals. And then I list some turning points. So we know that Fizo founded the insurgency. Fizo is somebody who had helped the Japanese army, he claims, and Azad Hind Fauj when they were coming into Nagaland or Naga areas, hoping that they will get them freedom. That didn't happen. But Fizo, on 14th of August 1947, that's a day before India's independence, declared independence for Nagaland. Obviously, India did not accept it. In 1956, that's the first key date, the first armed attacks took place. A large garrison of Assam police was overrun and lots of policemen were taken prisoner. Again in the same year, convoy of Indian Army was ambushed, 29 soldiers, I think the entire convoy was wiped out. A Naga ambush is not a pretty sight. That is when the Indian state reacted. So the next turning point is 1958. Why? Because 1958, the law that so many people complain about now, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it was enacted in 1958 essentially to give the army to power to fight the Naga insurgencies. So that's why initially when the law was passed, it was called Armed Forces Special Powers Assam and Manipur Act. Assam because Nagaland was a district in Assam, and Manipur because there were Naga territories in Manipur as well. And then started this sort of 7 decades, 6 plus decades of fighting, of very bitter fighting. In fact, if you go to the Armed Forces War Memorial next door to India Gate in Delhi, and you look at the plaques there, barring the prominent wars like 62, 65, 71, 47, 48, etc. with Pakistan and China, you will find the bulk of the casualties, battle casualties, operational casualties were in the Naga insurgency theatre. Because unlike other insurgencies where 2 fight or 5 fight, or say Kashmir now, where the odd couple of people hide in a mosque or in a house. Nagaland wasn't that. In Nagaland, Nagas even carried out ambushes in larger formations. And they took on larger garrisons as well. So this was a very classical kind of insurgency. From 1958, we come to another key date, that is 1960. That's when Nagas laid siege around an Indian army garrison. It was surrounded and cut off. An airdrop was being carried out repeatedly to drop supplies there by IAF Dakotas, one of which was shot down, crash landed there. Its crews were taken prisoner. This is 1960. Now for India, it was an Indian state, it was a big humiliation that you can shoot down a Dakota and take its crews prisoner. The crews were treated well and they were released in good time. But then the state's response also became much tougher. What happened then came 1962, a very key date because the Chinese came and Indian army left the northeast, but I will visit this a little bit later. I will revisit this, I leave it here. In 1963, Nagaland was carved out of Assam into a separate state, and then fighting went on. As fighting went on, then by this time you found that the intelligence people had made their sort of inroads into the Naga organization. Some peacemakers had come in, Sarvodaya organization, Jayaprakash Narayan, Vinoba Bhave. They were also getting involved in peacemaking. There were some good peacemakers among the Nagas. In any case, a lot of communication started, as a result of which tribal groups started peeling off from the underground. So the first large tribe to start peeling off or get disillusioned were the Semas. Semas, as I told you, they are among the three tribes which are 13 to 14%, three of the largest tribes. Semas also constituted the bulk of the Naga underground fighting force. So the first general, if you look at the history of generals, army used to call them SS, as in self-styled general, self-styled lieutenant, self-styled lieutenant colonel, not Himmler's SS. But the first self-styled general was a Sema. He was Kaito Sema. He started supporting the Indian army against other tribal groups. His brother was the prime minister in the underground, or Ato Kilonsar, as the prime minister is called in Naga tradition. He was once casually roaming around, driving his jeep in Kohima with his brother when an assassin came and killed him. As that happened, it got Semas even more angry. For Semas, he was like, my Sema friends always told me, he was like our Che Guevara, or he was like, if we were the North Vietnamese, he was like our General Giap. So his assassination at the age of 37 became a big sore point. With Kaito's death, Semas became even more disillusioned, and then some funny things happened. And all these stories of smoke and mirrors. Maybe somebody betrayed Movu Angami, who became the chief of the Naga army after Kaito. He was also general. So General Movu Angami, coming in from China, was trapped by the Indian army, by a very large formation of Indian army. The division commander then was Major General N.C. Rowley. So he was surrounded, and finally he was caught. How he was caught is a little bit mysterious, but as I told you, as I keep telling you, Indian approach was always to protect the lives of the commanders or the top leaders. So he was arrested, he was flown to Delhi for interrogation, but along with him came about 165 cadres, nearly 200 automatic rifles, 7.62 mm, 4 mortars. This is 1969. So that became the next big turning point. Large group of insurgents, including the chief, were taken prisoner, and obviously information must have been gleaned from them. The next turning point comes in 1972-73, and there's a reason for that. One, Semas are already disillusioned. Chief after Movu is a Sema again, is Uheto Sema. He was a legendary soldier. I don't think anybody respected him more, even among the Nagas, than say the Indian army. He was a very worthy adversary, very stealthy, master of the ambush, master of the large ambush, not chota ambush, large ambush. He knew how to get out of Nagaland, go to Burma, go to China, any place. Wizard. He came over ground with his cadres on 16th of January, 16th of August 1973. In that year, 2,650 armed insurgents surrendered. Why did I say that year? There's a reason why it happened. 71, East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So that was one base that both Naga and Mizo insurgents lost. It was also their easy route to China. So that weakened them. As Suharto came over ground, then Naga underground movement or underground fighting movement became a mortal blow. Now they were left with very little force inside. Suharto, as I told you earlier, he only wanted to do no soldiering. So Mrs. Gandhi set up a new battalion of BSF under his command. He was second in command first and then rose to be DIG in BSF, got decorated. And his boys who had surrendered with him became all soldiers, BSF soldiers under his command. Along with him came another very interesting and important person. That was Mr. Skato Su. Now, Skato Su was not a fighter, but he was the underground leader who, in Phizo's absence, was the president of the provisional government of the federal government of Nagaland, as they called themselves. So he was the president of FGN while Phizo was away. So he was head of, in a way, because Nagas thought they were a state, he was the head of state. So he also came over ground. And he said at that point, in fact, he made a very prescient statement. He said, look, to talk of independence now is not worthwhile. He said, even if we get independence, Nagas would not be able to live together. We will fight amongst ourselves. And as there is a lot of tribal politics. Skato Su was then nominated a member of Rajya Sabha. He's somebody I had the pleasure of knowing, the privilege of knowing quite well, a man of peace. He served 2 terms in Rajya Sabha. With this, effectively, the Sema element in the underground had now left. And the Angami general, Movu Angami, had already been caught. But there was another general now who came in. That was General Thinozili Keho. Thinozili Medom Keho. Once again, nice, tough guy. I got to know him later after he had come over ground. And there were times when some of us got overly drunk in his place and sort of staggered back from there to where we used to stay, which was then the MLA's hostel. That was the only place to stay. Anyway, next turning point now comes in 1975 because the underground fighting force has weakened. Phizo is not getting younger overseas. 75 is also the emergency. Mrs. Gandhi is running a very tough government. In 1975, 11th January, another peace accord is signed, and that is the biggest peace accord. That is the Shillong Peace Accord. Shillong Peace Accord was signed by key leaders of the Naga underground, including Phizo's brother, K.V. Yale, also Thinozili's brother, which is Biseto Medom Keho, and Zimik Romeo, who was a senior Tangkhul leader. Tangkhul is a tribe from Manipur, the same tribe that Muiwa belongs to. And this was a simple agreement. In fact, you will see it behind me. It's a 1-page agreement. It's the size of a leave application. It has 3 clauses. One, that Nagas now unconditionally accept the Indian Constitution. Second, they will bring their weapons over ground, which will be kept in safe houses run by peace groups. And number 3, that leaders will be given time to deliberate on their final relationship with India. But remember, the first was that they accept Indian Constitution. Then there were supplementary agreements also signed to this. Again, mostly about how the armament will be kept and how they will be treated. With this, that one phase of Naga insurgency ended. Phizo neither supported this nor criticized it. Obviously, his brother had signed it. So it was widely believed that this had Phizo's tacit approval. Later, Phizo's niece, Rano Shaiza, set up, who was a politician, the first woman to win parliament election from Nagaland. She had set up a meeting between Phizo and Morarji Desai in London, which did not go very far, but basically that part of the insurgency was over, but a new chapter was now to begin. Now, how did the new chapter begin? Because within the Naga underground, there were other groups who were, one, a bit more radicalized in a socialist way under the Chinese indoctrination, and second, which also belonged to other tribes. So there was Muiwa, who was a Tangkhul from Manipur. There was Isak Chishi Swu, who was a Sema. He did not have a large force under him, but he was an old Sema commander, again, more socialist, who did not like this peace agreement. There were also two other tribal leaders. There was Khole Konyak. Konyaks live up the north and the eastern extremities of Nagaland, and SS Khaplang, who was a Hemi tribal from Myanmar. So Khaplang, Khole Konyak, Isak Chishisu, sort of in the leadership of Isaac Muiba, set up a new group called National Socialist Council of Nagaland. So for the first time, Naga Underground declared that it had an ideology. In fact, there's a little side story to this. Somewhere in my papers, I also have a copy of the first constitution and the second constitution of the NSCN in red type on the cover, white jacket, but red type. Initially, they were going to be much more socialist, but in that process, initially they attacked a few churches and burned them. And when they got the blowback from the tribal community, which was very devout with its Christianity, they immediately amended their constitution. So instead of saying we stand for National Socialist Constitution, they said we stand for an independent National Socialist Constitution, National Socialist Nagaland for Christ. So that is the change they made. By 1985, they had become quite powerful. Once again, because Burmese government was not in control of North Burma. But once again, state response started. Another bell curve was being formed, same as one bell curve. Angamis was the second bell curve with the Shillong Peace Accord, because Thinozili and others came over ground as a result of that. Fezo and his family signed as a result of that, Angamis. Now, a third bell curve was beginning. So 2001 was the first one-year ceasefire between Government of India and Muiba ISAC group. And then talks took place, and more talks took place, and more talks took place. In the process, Isaac Chishiswu died. Then whatever little Sema's presence was there also thinned out. Khaplang died, and Khaplang's group, in any case, because they were in Burma, they became irrelevant. But Muiba remained. The group is still called Muiba Isaac Group. He still has about 6,000 fighters. In fact, when the first ceasefire came, he only had about 2,500. Now he has 6,000 because life became very easy. Weapons are available. You can extort, you can collect money. And many of IM loyalists, people, supporters, members are now running very successful businesses all over the country. They are running salons, they are running bars, they are running beauty parlors. They become entrepreneurs. And Government of India now thinks that they have acquired sufficient vested interest, economic vested interest in staying on with India. And that's why they're pushing with these peace talks. So that is where we stand now. Muiba is the last man standing against this, because Muiba has suddenly brought in this demand of a flag, separate flag, and the constitution. Now, on the government side, if you talk, they say it's an afterthought. He said, I was promised shared sovereignty. What is shared sovereignty if I don't have my flag and constitution? But I can tell you that's not going to happen. He's being isolated right now because government again and intelligence people are smart. I told you earlier also, Nagaland is also a history of intelligence bureau's brilliance. The current governor also is part of that same succession of brilliant people. They have now set up a new organization called NNPG, Naga National Political Groups, which consists of groups that are splintering out away from Muiba, including a prominent Tangkhul leader. Those groups have said that, look, talk of sovereignty is poppycock, it is a fantasy, it is not good, and we don't need it. So, in a way, Government of India has now been able to isolate or push Muiba in a corner, hoping that he will agree. So this idea of giving a deadline for the agreement was a bit like increasing the flow of water in the tap, because then you know water is running faster, so tank will empty out. Let me either take a shower or drink some water or turn the tap off. That is where we are right now. So before I conclude this, I will tell you two stories which are very relevant to Nagaland. One, I told you I'll come back to 62. But before that, I will take you back to 1947. So, Sir Charles Ridley Posey, remember that name. He was the last ICS British Deputy Commissioner of Naga Hills. A lot of the Nagas think that he convinced them that they can survive as a sovereign country. He was a friend of the Nagas. He was knighted on 14th August 1947, the day before India became independent. But he wrote something which I found from a publication called Naga Nation, which tells you that he did not ask them to separate from India. He said, autonomy for Nagaland within the Indian Union will be the more prudent course to follow. Independence will mean tribal warfare, no hospitals, no schools, no salt. Salt's very important in tribal areas and very scarce. No trade with the plains, general unhappiness. So obviously Fizo and others did not listen to him. Now, having talked about him, I will come to 1962, and that's my concluding story. So Mr. Skato Swu that I told you about, the Prime Minister, the President of the Underground, who also came over ground and surrendered, made peace in 1973 and became a member of Rajya Sabha. I had the chance of driving with him at night in October 1982, 37 years back, between Dimapur and Kohima when I had gone to cover the election, the assembly election. So we started talking on the way, and he was telling me how at one point he had 10,000 boys carrying automatic weapons when Indian or Pakistani army did not have automatic weapons. So I said, that was early 60s. He said, yes. So I said, 62, Indian army had gone away. He said, yes. I said, when Indian army went away, why didn't you just blow the whistle? You could have declared sovereignty. So he laughed, big, loud laughter. And he said, hey, you are the first Indian who has asked me this question. Don't feel offended if somebody calls you an Indian. We are seen as people from very far. So he said that when Indian army went away in 62, Nagaland was left with just 2 battalions of Madhya Pradesh Special Armed Police. If I had blown the whistle, they would have run away. But that's when we leaders met and we introspected and we said, what will happen once we get sovereignty? And we figured that if we get away from India's sovereignty, we will come under then Chinese influence. We had all trained in Tibet. Now, what were we fighting for? We were fighting to preserve the Naga way of life and to preserve our Christianity, our faith. But in Tibet, many of us had seen that the Chinese had taken away the Tibetan way of life, they were doing sinification, and they had destroyed their Buddhist faith and temples. So we were not going to go with China. So the moment of truth came when sovereignty was staring them in the face. They just had to go and take it. But that's when they decided that they will stay on with India and find a modus vivendi. And when Shillong Agreement was signed in 75, some of these concerns were addressed, and this is very relevant now because this is just after Article 370 effective abrogation. This was Article 371A, under which Nagaland was given certain protections. And this will come up now. And basic protection was that no act of Indian Parliament will apply to Nagaland if it's in respect of religious, social, cultural practices, customary law, ownership and transaction of land and resources of Nagaland. So even for ONGC to go and prospect for oil in Nagaland, it has to take permission of the people of Nagaland, which will come through Nagaland Assembly. So this addressed some of these insecurities that Nagas had, which the Chinese would never have given them.